The spatial crack lines slowly spread, and the icy bone-chilling monstrous aura also permeated the place. Immediately, a white figure finally slowly stepped out from the space. Finally, it appeared in front of the countless number of eyes. Ninth, it is expected that you have actually activated the spatial jade piece. The white figure slowly appeared as an indifferent voice sounded. Humph, stop being annoying. You should take a good look at the opponent this time around. Ninth Tianzuan frowned and spoke in a deep voice. The white figure slowly raised his head when he heard Ninth Tianzuan words. He had an old face and his hair was white. Even both of his eyes were dense white in color, causing one to feel a kind of extremely icy cold feeling. At a glance, he appeared just like a block of ice. Yao Chen, huh? The white figure's eyes paused on Yao Lao's body a short distance in front. He was slightly startled before he immediately seemed to have sensed something. A little ripple appeared in his white eyes. You have recovered your strength? The Hall of Soul is really well prepared. It is still not rest assured despite dispatching a ninth Tianzuan. It has actually dispatched even you. Yao Lao glanced at that eighth Tianzuan and spoke faintly. No wonder, with your strength alone, you are indeed no match for him. It seems that the loss from today's mission is quite great. Eighth Tianzuan's snow-white brows twitched a little. He glanced at those experts from the Hall of Soul, fleeing into the distance before speaking. He has just regained a body. Although his strength has recovered, it will have difficulty reaching its peak. I alone might not be sufficient, but if the two of us were to join hands, it is not possible to tell just who will be defeated. Ninth Tianzuan's expression was slightly sinister as he said, You should not underestimate this old fellow. Eighth Tianzuan knitted his brows and said, Why? Are you afraid? We are the leaders of this mission. If it fails, it is likely that we will have difficulty accounting to the top, no? Ninth Tianzuan glanced towards Eighth Tianzuan when he spoke until this point. He continued, Moreover, you have once been defeated in his hands back then. It has been a sore point for you all these while. If you do not make an attempt today, it is likely that you will no longer have such an opportunity in the future. Hearing this, the hand of Eighth Tianzuan, which was fondling his beard, paused. Some fluctuating rose within his white eyes. A moment later, he nodded slowly and said, In that case, let's attack. I also really wish to know if the current Yao Chen is as mighty as the one back then. Relax, with us combining our strength, we will be able to fight even a 9-star Dozun. Currently, Yao Lao had just obtained his body and will definitely be unable to use it with great familiarity. It is not bad for him to possess even 70 to 80% of his strength. Ninth Tianzuan laughed. Immediately, his eyes became stern. He clenched his hand suddenly, and a vast and mighty fluctuation spread from his hand. Following the spreading of this ripple, the entire place quickly became moist. Rain droplets were formed out of nowhere. At a glance, they were densely packed together and appeared to stretch endlessly. Xiao stood on the top of a mountain. He frowned slightly as he watched those raindrops in front of him. His hand grabbed one of them, only to be startled to find that the interior of this raindrop contained an extremely dense water affinity energy. Although this kind of energy appeared gentle and calm, it possessed an extremely strong erosion properties. Based on Xiao guess, if this droplet of strange raindrop was to be shot over at great speed, it would likely be easily able to penetrate through the Do-Chi defense of an expert Do Huang. Just one droplet alone possessed such a terrifying destructive strength. Just how terrifying the destructive strength would be should the densely packed, endless raindrops in the sky gather together. It is said that the advancement of every star in the Dozun class would cause one's strength to soar greatly. These words are indeed true. Xiao softly muttered. He currently had the strength of a 2-star Dozun. After unleashing the Skyfire 3 mysterious change, he was only able to reach the strength of a 4-star Dozun. Moreover, This was because the materials he used to unleash the Skyfire 3 mysterious flame were 3 types of heavenly flames. If it was some other flames, it was likely that he would not even be able to raise his strength by 1 star. Moreover, despite Xiao Yin having reached the strength of a 4-star Dozun, he only possessed 2 methods to kill someone of Old Ghost Zhai Xing's strength. One was to merge the Annihilation Lotus Flame with 4 heavenly flames. The other was to rely on the Tian-class Do skill, Great Heaven Creation Palm, that he had learned. Other than these, he no longer had any methods. From this, one could tell just how great the difference between the levels within the Dozun class was. If one did not possess a special technique, it was quite difficult to fight across the levels. Yao Lao stood in the air in the distant sky. His eyes were calm as he watched the mysterious raindrops that spread across the sky. Any raindrop that appeared within 1,000 feet from him would explode the moment it was formed. At this moment, everyone's eyes, regardless of whether it was the disciples of the Falling Star Pavilion or the experts in the distance, were gathered in the sky. Everyone could tell that these 2 top experts within the Hall of Soul were preparing to unleash a truly earth-shaking attack at this moment. Gather! Ninth Tianzuan's expression was unusually grave at this moment. A sharp cry had suddenly sounded from his throat as the seals formed by his hands changed. After the sharp cry by Ninth Tianzuan sounded, the mysterious rain droplets that filled the sky immediately shook. They immediately rushed explosively towards him amidst waves after waves of air-splitting swoosh sound. Finally, it swiftly agglomerated in front of Ninth Tianzuan. Within the blink of an eye, 1,000 feet large azure rainball had slowly appeared. The rainball was enormous. It was completely blue in color. While it rotated slowly, the monstrous energy that spread from it caused the expressions of quite a number of people to turn ashen. If this energy was to explode, it was likely that this mountain range would be racked and flattened in an instant. When the rainball was formed, 8th Tianzuan by the side also inhaled a deep breath of air. He raised his hand and pointed towards the rainball from a great distance. Dense white chilling air suddenly spluttered out from his hand. Finally, it adhered onto the rainball. Crack, crack. The dense white ice swiftly spread apart upon making contact with the rainball. Within a short moment, that blue rainball had become an enormous ice ball. Moreover, the energy that it contained within it was also becoming increasingly frightening. The strength of a Do skill that 2 elite Hall of Soul experts joined hands to unleash was sufficient to shatter even one's soul. Things has become a little out of hand this time around. Those experts in the distance looked at the enormous ice ball in the sky. The terrifying energy fluctuation that spread from the ice ball caused even their souls to feel pressured. While their face was pale, these people also began to withdraw. If such a frightening energy was to explode, the entire mountain range would be flattened. They would likely also be buried with this place. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The expression of Feng Zunjia's group within the Falling Star Pavilion was solemn as he watched those experts swiftly pulling back. From the looks of the energy contained within this ice ball, it was likely already too late to escape even if they started running now. Yao Kim, back then, this venerable self was defeated in your hands. I wonder if you have the ability to block this combined attack of the 2 of us today. 8th Tianzuan's face had become a little paler after he turned the rainball into an ice ball. Clearly, this attack had exhausted quite a great amount of his strength. Yao Lao merely twitched his eyebrows in the face of the loud cry by the 8th Tianzuan. There was little emotional fluctuation on his face. It was as though the enormous ice ball that could destroy the mountain range did not exist. Humph, I want to see just how long you can try to act brave. 9th Tianzuan involuntarily laughed coldly in the face of this calmness by Yao Lao. Both of his hands formed numerous seals with lightning-like speed. A moment later, his face suddenly reddened. A mouthful of fresh blood was spat out and shot onto the enormous ice ball. An explosive cry suddenly sounded. Rain heaven erosion. A cry that was filled with an incomparable dominance resounded over the sky. Ninth Tianzuan duo suddenly pushed forward with their hands. The enormous ice ball shook for a moment before it began to rotate rapidly. Finally, it rushed explosively towards Yao Lao with lightning-like speed amidst a deafening rumbling sound. During the time that the ice ball rushed forward, a frightening energy ripple spread from it. Every inch of the surrounding space crumbled. 1,000 feet large dark black spatial crack line appeared from the empty space like a black ribbon. Seeing the destructive strength of the ice ball, those fleeing experts were completely terrified. They went all out to increase their speed as they rushed out of this mountain range. Xiao Yan's expression was grave as he watched the enormous ice ball from the mountain top. Immediately, his eyes paused on Yao Lao, who had not even moved. His heart sighed in relief after seeing the latter's expression. What a frightening attack, Pavilion Chief. Can he block it? All the disciples of the Falling Star Pavilion were extremely tensed at this moment. In the face of this terrifying strength, even this entire mountain range had become exceptionally small. At such a moment, all that they could do was to place their hope on Yao Lao. Today, you and the Falling Star Pavilion shall be destroyed under the combined strength of the both of us. A wild and heated expression surfaced in the eyes of 9th Tianzuan and 8th Tianzuan when they saw the frightening ice ball becoming increasingly closer to Yao Lao. When the ice ball entered 1,000 feet from Yao Lao, the latter finally slowly raised his hand in front of the countless number of gazes. An icy cold smile involuntarily surfaced on the faces of 9th Tianzuan duo when they saw that Yao Lao was actually thinking of forcefully receiving this ice ball. Stop! However, the smiles of the two had just appeared when it suddenly stiffened under the subsequent faint voice. The soft cry was slowly spread from Yao Lao's mouth. Immediately, everyone was stunned to see that the fast-rotating icy ball suddenly stilled when it was still some distance from Yao Lao. The entire mountains was deathly silent. That 9th Tianzuan duo had a dull expression at this moment. Their combined attack was something that even an expert at the peak of the Do Zun class could not stop as he pleased. Yao Lao's hand was gently inserted into the enormous ice ball. His calm water-like voice slowly resounded over the sky. The current me is indeed unable to unleash my full strength. However, it is more than enough to deal with the two of you. This is because... Upon speaking until this point, an expression of a cat teasing a mouse suddenly appeared on Yao Lao's face. The current me is no longer at the peak of the Do Zun class. Instead, it is Ban Sheng. Ban Sheng. These two simple words were undoubtedly like a furious thunder that suddenly blasted violently beside the ears of 9th Tianzuan and 8th Tianzuan. At this moment, it appeared as though the Do Qi within their bodies had ceased circulating. They widened their mouths. Their faces were dull as they looked at the old man in the distance, who had stopped the enormous ice ball with a single hand. Ban Sheng. Perhaps other people might find this level extremely unfamiliar. However, 9th and 8th Tianzuan were quite familiar with it. This was because this level was called an abyss of despair by many experts at the peak of the Do Zun class. Most of the experts in this world who had reached the peak of the Do Zun class ended up halting at the edge of this Ban Sheng class. Regardless of how they trained, they were unable to truly step into this so-called Ban Sheng class. Only by stepping into the Ban Sheng class would one be able to possess the qualification to step into the Do Sheng class. One could even say that Ban Sheng was the most important foundation stone before one stepped into the Do Sheng class. If one was unable to enter the Ban Sheng level, one could forget about ever becoming a genuine elite Do Sheng. While Do Di was gradually becoming a legend that existed only in history, the simple Sheng word represented the peak of this entire world. An elite Dozun could be considered to be top experts of this continent. However, the top ultimately did not represent the peak. The peak of this world belonged to those experts of an even higher class. Similarly, this so-called Ban Sheng level was also a state that 9th and 8th Tianzins had dreamed about. However, their hearts understood just how difficult it was to reach this level. Perhaps they might not be truly able to reach it, even if they were to use their entire lifetime. They had never expected that Yao Lao was able to step into that class. From the way they thought of it, even if Yao Lao had regained a new body, it was already extremely difficult for him to recover to his peak strength, much less break through the peak of the Dozun class and advance to a Ban Sheng. Although they had never expected it, reality was extremely cruel. The situation that they had least expected had appeared in front of them as reality. Ban Sheng. All the eyes within the star realm gathered onto that elderly figure in the sky. Compared to that incomparably large ice ball, this figure appeared exceptionally tiny. However, at this moment, the pressure that was emitted from this small figure caused even the frightening energy that spread from within the icy ball to tremble a little. Ban Sheng, this old fellow, has actually advanced into that stage. Feng Zunjia and the others were stunned as they watched the figure. It was a long time later before a wild joy finally surged into their hearts. Ban Sheng. Although there was a Yi Ban half word, it was still related to the Sheng word, which represented the peak. This was a transforming leap. The falling star pavilion is about to prosper. Those many experts, who were originally fleeing, had also come to a halt because of the scene in the sky. Some of the knowledgeable experts felt their mouths become dry. The falling star pavilion had produced a Ban Sheng. This seemingly explosive news would likely sweep throughout the entire Central Plains like a hurricane. The reputation and strength of the falling star pavilion in the future would likely soar in a frightening manner within a short period of time. The Hall of Soul might be frightening, but the falling star pavilion in the future was no longer something that they could destroy just because they wanted to. An expert at the Ban Sheng class was someone that even the Hall of Soul must treat seriously. Most importantly, this elite Ban Sheng was also the top alchemist in the continent. His reputation and influence was likely something that no one could compare with. Hence, at this moment, everyone understood that the falling star pavilion was going to prosper. Xiao Yin had a joyous face as he stood on the mountain top. Yao Lao's breakthrough from the peak of the Dozun class and advancement to the Ban Sheng level had far exceeded his expectations. Although the ingredients that he had chosen to refine Yao Lao's body with this time around were all of top quality, and that he had even added a Dosheng arm at the end, he did not expect that it could eventually allow Yao Lao to break through. Originally, based on his expectations, Yao Lao's ability to recover his peak strength was already an extremely joyous matter. As for breaking through the Dozun class, that kind of matter was something that was not given much thought. This was because the difficulty of breaking through the Dozun class was something that he also understood well. Although there were fewer elite Dozuns on this continent, their numbers were far from the point of being as rare as a phoenix feather or a unicorn horn. On the other hand, the legendary Do Sheng, even with Xiao Yan's experience, he had merely just seen a Do Sheng skeleton with a remnant soul imprint once. Of course, the currently Yao Lao could likely only be considered an elite Ban Sheng. Although Ban Sheng had a Ban half word, it was at the very least a Sheng. Yao Lao was suspended in the distant sky. His gaze was calm as he glanced at 9th Tianzuan duo far away. His hand, which was touching the ice ball, was slowly clenched. Crack! After Yao Lao clenched his hand, the surface of the ice ball that contained a terrifying energy suddenly became distorted. That appearance was as though there was an incomparably large hand violently pinching it. Shatter! The surface of the ice ball became increasingly distorted. A moment later, it finally emitted a crack sound amidst Yao Lao's faint voice and suddenly burst apart. When the ice ball burst apart, The terrifying energy storm immediately swept apart like a hurricane. However, these storm came to an abrupt halt after spreading to a certain distance. It was quietly destroyed. Gulp. Countless number of people violently swallowed a mouthful of saliva as they looked at the ice chips that slowly scattered down from the sky. That frightening attack, which could annihilate this entire mountain range, was actually resolved so easily. Yao Lao's sleeve did not even move a little. Is this the strength of an elite band, Sheng? Many experts exchanged glances with another. They could see a deep shock from the other party's eyes. Such a strength had already far exceeded the Dozun class. It was indeed worthy of being a true peak strength. Groan. Ninth and 8th Tianzuan were affected when the ice ball was destroyed. Their bodies shook and a muffled moan was emitted from their throats. A trace of blood seeped out from the corner of their mouths at the same time. Even their aura had become a little chaotic. Clearly, Yao Lao had not only shattered the ice ball, but had even directly caused quite a great amount of damage to their bodies. 8th Tianzuan wiped off the blood trace from the corner of his mouth. His eyes stared intently at Yao Lao in the distance. Those eyes were filled with terror and unwillingness. Back then, he had once been defeated in Yao Lao's hands. It was unexpected that in this first meeting of theirs after that time, he would actually be defeated in Yao Lao's hands once again. Moreover, it was a truly miserable defeat. Ban Sheng. 9th Tianzuan clenched his teeth. The envy in his eyes was basically about to be raised to a frenzy level. However, he was not an ordinary person. A moment later, he forcefully suppressed the emotion within his heart. A grayish-white expression surged onto his face. After having discovered Yao Lao's current level, he understood that the mission today could be considered to have truly failed. If Yao Lao was still at the peak of the Dozun class, 9th Tianzuan might find it troublesome to deal with, but would not feel helpless and despair. However, no one could expect that Yao Lao had not only recovered his peak strength, but had even broken through the barrier that was regarded by most experts at the peak of the Dozun class to be an abyss of despair, and finally advanced into the Ban Sheng stage. This was a class that was completely different from that of a Dozun. Although it was only Ban, half, Sheng, but even the combined strength of two experts at the peak of the Dozun class would have difficulty defeating him. There was an enormous gap between the two that one would have difficulty attempting to make up for. 8th, let's go. 9th Tianzuan inhaled a deep breath of air. He decisively cried out to 8th Tianzuan in a deep voice. Hearing the cry of 9th Tianzuan, the fist of 8th Tianzuan immediately tightened. His face was filled with an unwillingness. He has currently already advanced to a Ban Sheng. Even if the both of us were to join hands, we will not be a match for him. If you wish to remain behind and seek your own death, I will not join you. 9th Tianzuan's expression sunk when he saw this. He chided furiously. Let's go. Fortunately, this 8th Tianzuan was also not a reckless person. He also understood that there was no longer any chance to turn things around for this mission today. All he could do was to nod his head. He waved his hand, and the space beside him was swiftly torn into a spatial crack line. Their bodies flashed, and they rushed into this crack line. Since you have come, you should at least leave something. Yao Lao in the distant sky smiled faintly when he saw this situation. He extended his hand and violently clenched it while aiming at the spatial crack line across the distance. Boom! After Yao Lao clenched his hand, that spatial crack line immediately collapsed. An incomparable frightening wind directly penetrated through the space and rushed into the spatial crack line. Two low and deep muffled sound were vaguely emitted. Grug. Two bright red blood arrows shot out from the crack line after the muffled sound appeared. After which, it rushed towards Yao Lao with a swift lightning-like speed. However, they automatically turned into a cluster of bloody fog that scattered away when they reached 1,000 feet from Yao Lao. Yao Zunjia, just you wait. My Hall of Soul will not simply take this lying down. While blood arrow scattered, the distant spatial crack line also slowly disappeared. However, the furious roar of Ninth Tianzuan penetrated through the air and reverberated over this place. The pain contained within the roar indicated that Yao Lao's earlier palm had hurt him quite badly. Yao Lao smiled slightly in a non-committal manner in the face of this roar. Having advanced into the Banshang stage, he could be considered to have stepped into the peak level of the continent. The current him was no longer the Yao Zunjia from back then. Perhaps the current him could have another form of address like Saint Shang Yao, Yao Chen.